Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Missing Frames. This is the podcast where we watch all the movies we should have seen by this point in our lives. I'm your host, Shawn Eastridge. Look, if you've seen the title of this episode, you know we're going to be talking about talking heads. And in the interest of the listeners' safety, you out there listening to this episode, I didn't think it wasn't right or safe to just allow my unfiltered talking heads love to come through your headphones, your speakers, whatever it is. It's kind of like the UV rays of the sun. If you don't have some form of protection, you will get burnt. So I needed to have somebody on who was awesome enough to kind of filter the talking heads love and maybe make it a bit more palatable for the listeners at home. So we have one Mr. Spencer Tweedy on. Spencer, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You are an incredibly talented individual. You are a musician, a writer, and you are protecting people from my unbridled love of talking heads. How do you feel?
I feel great, and that's really kind of you. Thank you. That's hyperbole, but gratefully accepted.
We also have to shout out, I did not realize this, but your dad, your dad's pretty cool too. We should give him a shout out.
I agree.
Yeah, he's the lead singer of one of my favorite bands. Certainly one of the bands I say is my favorite, Wilco. And it's the 9th anniversary of the album you two recorded together, Suki Ray, as Tweedy. So congratulations, 9 years. How does it feel?
It feels unbelievable. It's hard to believe that 9 years have passed since that record came out. It still feels like the new thing we were working on, just casually, not even knowing if it was going to be released or turn into a full record or who knows what. So it's weird. It's surreal. I think that's how it feels for every project. You look back and it flies by too quickly.
That's how it feels for me. I remember 9 years ago, I was at the Lincoln Theater. You guys performed there. I was at the show in DC, and I know you were looking out at that audience thinking someday, 9 years from now, I'm going to be on a podcast of somebody in this audience.
I knew it. I had a feeling that night at that show. It's like, there's a podcast host here. I mean, granted, it was DC. So
yeah. So there was probably I think everyone in the audience may have actually been a podcast host.
Yeah. As a heuristic, it was a safe guess, but it turned out to be true.
And it worked out really well. And it worked out because we're also going to be talking about a film celebrating not only 9 years of Suki Ray, but 40 years of Stop Making Sense. We'll have you back on for the 40th anniversary of Suki Ray.
I hope so. That would be wonderful.
The 80th anniversary of Stop Making Sense and the 40th anniversary of Suki Ray. But you have not seen Stop Making Sense, my friend.
Yeah, I kind of have I guess I have a pattern now of being part of media series surrounding people's own negligence and lack of artistic education. My friend Josh Terry, the music journalist, had a series called Blind Spots where he had artists listen to super, super famous, well-known records that had somehow escaped their attention. And I was in the inaugural installment listening to Rumors, if you can believe that. So that's my thing, I guess, is being publicly undereducated. Although, if I'm being totally honest, I'm not really. I don't know. It hurts my ego to think that anyone would think I'm unaware of like all of the classic works out there. But I have some really egregious and embarrassing oversights, and this is one of them.
That's okay, though. Because what's nice is I've realized as I've gotten older, I'm turning 37 this year, and right around the age of 26, it became much harder for me to get as excited about new music. Like it became harder to stay into. This is probably not an issue that you have. I am certain it's not. But at that point, I remember thinking like, I'm not as excited about new things. I've kind of filled up my reservoir with the music I love, and everything else kind of falls by the wayside. And I thought that, and it really freaked me out. But I've learned that as time goes on, I still am like literally, I only just got into Neil Young 3 years ago.
Yeah.
When the pandemic started. I listened to Homegrown and was like, why haven't I been listening to Neil Young my entire life?
Oh, so good.
So this is all to say, you're not doing anything wrong.
Thank you.
It's okay to hear rumors. And maybe you can appreciate it more as a result of being where you are right now in the world and life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's an unbelievable, just an endless ocean of stuff out there. And even the super celebrated things can escape you and while you're swimming in that ocean. And B, honestly, most of my dad has played so many records for me growing up, and we focus on some of the weirder stuff that has captured his attention and his imagination over the years. So that's not to say that he dislikes Fleetwood Mac or he loves Talking Heads, but we just end up, listening to Trout Mask Replica by Captain Beefheart instead of Rumors or Fear of Music, although that's not true. We love listening to Talking Heads.
How old were you when he showed you Captain Beefheart?
I end up talking about this a lot, so please forgive me, any listeners, if you've heard this before, but it was honestly, it was the ride to preschool soundtrack all throughout my preschool years, like age 4 and 5. That and Elastica, which might ring a bell for some people. It's like a late 90s power pop band. I just heard Stephen Malkmus talking about Elastica the other day.
So you're in good company.
But those were the two. That and Electricity by Captain Beefheart were the two. And also Do the Collapse by Guided by Voices. Those are my 3 preschool commute soundtracks.
Oh, this is not somehow surprising and yet not at all surprising for some reason. I can't explain it.
But not Rumors.
Not Rumors. But you know what? It sounds like there was a lot going on in your musical education that was necessary to pave the way for the love of Rumors and to bring you to this episode and watching Stop Making Sense.
Yeah.
So, well, let me and you may need to crush this belief of mine, because my last year, my first ever Solid Sound, which is the festival that your dad Wilco put on, and I'd been talking about going for years. And last year, at the very last moment, I was like, I got to do it. I can't keep saying I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And no joke, when people ask me who my favorite band is, I say there are three bands: the Beatles, Wilco, and Talking Heads. And David Byrne made a surprise appearance at Solid Sound.
Mm-hmm.
I was at Solid Sound, and again, if you need to crush this dream, you're one of the only people who has permission to. But I felt like if I hadn't attended Solid Sound last year, the universe probably wouldn't have brought David Byrne to the festival. And I just feel like I'm owed some amount of thanks or festival royalties or something for making that happen. You're welcome.
You can have my thanks, absolutely. Because
that's all I really want. That's all I really want.
Absolutely. For whatever cosmic energy you emitted, out of what, instrument of your body it was emitted remains to be discovered. But however you did it.
Yes.
And whatever your role was, I thank you. It was really fun.
Thank you. That's all I really wanted. We could really just end the episode here. But you are, of the 2 people on this episode, you are the one who has played on stage with David Byrne. And it just felt right to reach out to you to celebrate this landmark anniversary of really arguably the greatest concert film of all time.
Yeah.
And getting to introduce it to you and being a part of this experience is a treat. But where in your musical education did Talking Heads fall? Do you remember when you started listening to them?
It had to have been on the radio as a kid. Probably, a great early Talking Heads memory. It just bolted into my mind. My elementary school, growing up, had an annual talent show for 7th and 8th graders, and my good friend Harry performed Psycho Killer during that talent show. And honestly,
an elementary school talent
during an elementary school talent show, Harry was pretty tall already for his age. He was He was probably, entering puberty, might have had like a little bit of a mustache going. He was wearing I remember he was wearing a white suit and like I said, already kind of tall, as tall as an adult. And
Mm.
even however many years later this is, like, I don't know, 14, 15 years later, the performance sticks out as one of the best, most like captivating performances I've ever seen someone give. And he was just lip syncing to Psycho Killer, or maybe I think he was singing with his real voice over a karaoke track, and he just owned it. I think he was by himself on stage, and he completely embodied David Byrne's energy. I think he might have been a little bit more moving his body more fluidly and enthusiastically than David Byrne ever really does, or less rigidly than David Byrne seems to move his body typically. I don't know. But that's an early Talking Heads memory. But I mean, the music is inescapable and it's undeniably great. So their other hits would have hit me, whether through the radio or just on shuffle in the car with my dad or something like that.
I have a story. I have a tale to tell. I got into Talking Heads in maybe the most roundabout way. I don't think anybody else out there has this Talking Heads discovery story. I'm going to try to keep this as brief as I possibly can. It's an epic tale. Everyone listening, sit back, maybe pause, take a potty break if you need to, and then come back and join us. But it was 2000, New Year's 2004. I even remember the date. So I had a group of friends, one of my best friends in high school. He and his two brothers, we were very, very close. And at the end of it was our sophomore year, they moved. I was in Northern Virginia near DC, and they moved to Pennsylvania. We were determined, despite the distance, to stay in touch and to remain friends forever. And so I would visit them. My dad would drive me up. I went up over the summer. And then we decided, the next big holiday, Christmas, New Year's, we have like 2 weeks off from school. Why don't I come up for New Year's? And as I was preparing, like, I think the day before, one of the brothers said to me on the phone, he was like, we have to dance to this song I just discovered. And what that song was do you remember Windows Media Player?
Yeah.
Yeah, so these were the days of Windows Media Player.
Mm-hmm.
Our listeners may not know about this. It was basically pre-iTunes, the way you listened to music.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a song included in the software of, I guess, a certain model of computer. And they had discovered it, and they said, this song it's ridiculous, and we have to film ourselves dancing to it. And that song was Like Humans Do by David Byrne. And so I went up to visit. We did indeed listen to the song, and we filmed ourselves dancing to it. And oddly, it became, when I went home, I had this video footage of us dancing, and it became kind of like a way to sort of relive the moment and connect to my friends. And when I was feeling kind of sad, they live far away, I would watch this video. But the song had been presented to me by them as if it was something ridiculous. And I was like, I actually kind of really love this song. And I went out to Borders. Again, we're really dating ourselves here.
Oh,
Borders was a bookstore. I don't know if our listeners are familiar with bookstores anymore, but they are places where you can indeed buy books. Went to Borders and I bought Look Into the Eyeball by David Byrne, the solo album with Like Humans Do on it. And I felt I was 17 years old. My favorite band at the time was Coldplay. I loved John Mayer. I think I had a Dashboard Confessional CD or two, and Newfound Glory was another one I can remember. I was not delving into the most adventurous music at that age. And I remember listening to Look Into the Eyeball and feeling like I was at a dinner party with a bunch of like artsy adults. And I felt like, I was like, I don't know what I'm listening to, but I feel so much more sophisticated for having listened to it.
Yeah.
And there were cool kids in my class who every time, this was when we had CD binders and we'd flip through them and judge each other accordingly. And so I would hand mine out, and mine had, the Lord of the Rings soundtracks and the bands I mentioned. And they would make fun of me, like, oh, you should really be listening to Radiohead and whatever else. And I was like, okay, maybe someday. And I remember one of these cool stoner kids who I so looked up to, and their music tastes were like, they were like gods to me. I was like, these kids are so cool, and I want to be as cool as them someday. They were like, oh, what is, you have David Byrne look into the eyeball? Have you ever listened to Talking Heads? And I was like, what's Talking Heads? I did not know. I thought I was the only one who knew about David Byrne. I was almost positive. And my friends were like, you got to listen to Talking Heads. Come on over. There was a party one night that I stumbled into and ran into these guys, and they were like, I have stopped making sense in my car. You're watching it right now. And it blew my mind.
Yeah.
And Talking Heads, and I want to ask you about this too. Talking Heads was really, for me, like formative in the way that, unlike the bands I mentioned where I'd heard them on the radio, or somebody told me I should get the CD, the radio told me it was good to get, Talking Heads, I felt like I'd discovered something accidentally that made me way cooler. That's the thing about great music. It makes you feel way cooler than you might actually be.
Yeah.
And I was suddenly like, my friends were listening to a lot of classic rock, and I tried to play Talking Heads, and they were like, where? Literally, I remember one of them saying, there are no guitar solos. And I was like, oh, is that a bad thing? Like, I don't know, but it felt like my thing. It felt really special, and Stop Making Sense was like what pushed me over the edge.
Yeah.
It was insane.
Yeah.
But are there any bands like that for you where because you were in a household where you have, your parents are listening to amazing music all the time. Did you have a chance at all to discover something on your own that you have been able to bring back to the table and say, how about that?
No. No, not really. No, but that's okay. Yeah.
It's okay. Someday you will. And someday you'll know how it feels to be as cool as I felt that day.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. I mean, it's like music helps form your sense of self. And I think it's really poignant that David Byrne's record like totally expanded your sense of self when you found it.
I think I'm the only person who discovered David Byrne before I discovered Talking Heads.
That's awesome.
If somebody out there has a similar experience, please let me know. But I can't say I've met any other people who can say this.
I think I've heard from a few people who found a Jeff Tweedy solo record before they listened to Wilco, which is cool.
That is awesome.
And I'm sure it's happened. It seems hard to believe, but I mean, over the course of billions of listeners, it's probably happened to Paul McCartney. Somebody probably heard a Paul song before they heard a Beatles song. Thousands of people.
You may be right. And these are people that deserve a chance in the limelight. And it's almost it's a very pure way to discover an artist, that roundabout way. Because in a lot of cases, these are bands that are like, you should be listening to the Beatles. You should be listening to Wilco. You should be listening to Talking Heads. But to kind of come around the corner and listen to a solo artist of that music is kind of like you did it yourself. You found it that kind of roundabout way, and then you get to discover this whole new world.
And it's a testament to how wonderful their music making is, because you fell in love with that David Byrne record, totally divorced from any like of the cultural context and prestige, which is a piece of evidence that he's actually really good.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So if he can convert a 17-year-old Coldplay fan, what can't he do, really? Yeah. But that's what brought us here today.
Yeah.
What do you know about Stop Making Sense? Tell me what you know.
Well, I've seen the trailer and I know that it's sort of, I think it's possibly the first instance of David Byrne's iconic oversized suit wearing. And it has some choreography involved. One thing I'm really looking forward to is the potential for some really tight angled shots of live music. That's something I'm craving all the time. It's maybe the 80s aren't like the totally prime decade for concert or for live music film that way, but nobody really does that anymore. They don't have super far zoom lenses, and they're not like zoomed in on the even you can't even see the entirety of one of the musician's face or something like that. It doesn't always have to be that extreme,
Right.
but just that intensity of focus and a spotlight is something that I think adds so much excitement to films of live music. So I'm looking forward to maybe a little bit of that in this film. I just think that people used to film live music or film music in general in a more exciting way,
Yeah.
typically. And so I'm hoping for that. But I don't really know much else. I didn't even really fully understand that it was considered a concert film. I've been aware of its existence for as long as I can remember, but I thought it was maybe some sort of hybrid or of live footage and studio concoction, or maybe not live at
Uh-huh.
all until now.
Well, you're in for a treat. I don't want to tell you too much. I will say this. I think what you're missing is the era of like the cinematic concert film. Because a lot of times it is, like you said, you
Yeah.
set up kind of a camcorder at the back of the room and you get the full stage, but it's not cinematic.
And we have
And
all these
you,
sweeping boom shots now. We've gotten so fancy with our camera technology, but I think it was amazing when like the fanciest we got was a zoom lens.
yeah, exactly. So this film is, I think they recorded it over 3 nights, 1983. It
Mm-hmm.
was released 1984, directed by Jonathan Demme. Are you familiar with Jonathan Demme?
No.
So he did Silence of the Lambs is the one he's most well known for. Philadelphia, Rachel Getting Married was one I really loved. He did one called Something Wild with Jeff Daniels, and I can't remember the female lead's name. People are shouting it. I assume they know and can fill in the blank themselves. But wonderful director. And this is very early in his career, but I think he'd done some music videos. I think he did. He also directed a couple Neil Young concert films later in life. And I'm pretty sure he directed some Bruce Springsteen stuff as well. I know the Streets of Philadelphia video. I think he directed that. Great filmmaker, but this is a guy who was cinematically minded and came to them. He saw the show and said, I want to make this into a movie. And they were like, that sounds great. Jordan Cronenweth was the director of photography. And this is the guy who shot Blade Runner. Have you seen Blade Runner?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the best looking movies ever, like arguably
Yeah.
one of the best looking films.
And that's interesting because it's a similar ethos. I mean, it's probably just a coincidence of him being a very popular cinematographer at the in that era, but there's a similar ethos between Talking Heads music and the presentation of their records and the way Blade Runner looks and feels, I think.
Absolutely. And Speaking in Tongues had just come out, so this was kind of
Yeah.
that era. And really that was like peak Talking Heads. I think that was the peak of their popularity and probably their artistic peak as well. But it was a special moment in time, and these brilliant filmmakers and amazing crew had the foresight to capture it cinematically. And David Byrne had already conceptualized the show and collaborated with them to really, so they were in sync with each other to best showcase what the show was all about.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say anything other than that, because what you've told me about it and what you know about it, I am extremely excited to hear your thoughts when you come back. Normally, I will ask an individual who has not seen a film what they think the plot of the film is. Since this is a concert film, it's a little different. But what songs are you hoping to hear and Stop Making Sense?
What's the song? Is it called Same as It Ever Was?
Once in a Lifetime.
Once in a Lifetime, right. I'm hoping to hear that song, but really, I mean, any of the material from that era is gonna, I know it's going to blow my mind.
It will. I don't want to spoil it for you, but I have good feelings. I have the same vibe I had at Solid Sound when I brought David Byrne. He materialized through force of my will.
Yes.
I had that same feeling, that same glow in my heart. I can feel it now.
Thanks. Well, yeah, me too. I mean, there's just something I really, really identify with in David Byrne's approach to rhythm and like the palette that he uses. Maybe today even more than back then, because he's so focused on acoustic percussion and all the things that he demonstrated in American Utopia, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Along the lines of you discovering his solo record before Talking Heads proper. I've seen American Utopia and I loved it. I've only seen the film. And now going back in time to Stop Making Sense. But I think that his approach to music and his emphasis on rhythm, the emotional response to rhythm is beautiful. And like that song from that solo record that that you and your friends had to dance to,
Like Humans Do?
yeah, Like Humans Do. And that record, the palette on there, is that the one? Did he make that with Brian Eno?
No, that was what is it? Everything That Happens Will Happen Today. That was
Okay, yeah,
2008, I
yeah,
think. But definitely a similar vibe. Very different from My Life in the Bush of
yeah,
Ghosts, but like very, very much like David Byrne's solo output.
totally. And there's a common thread, even back through to the late 70s of this is sort of the way he's always been, and the way him and his collaborators have also obviously helped him accomplish this. But I love it, to put it simply. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that live. I haven't really watched much live footage of him or of the band, and it's something that really speaks to me, like it does for you and like it does for zillions of other people.
I'm very excited for you. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back. Stay tuned.
Now available to own on video cassette.
All right, we're back. Spencer Tweedy, how did you feel about watching Stop Making Sense for the first time?
Absolutely loved it. It's undeniably great. There's not really room for debate. Of course, there's room for debate. Anyone will debate anything. But it's staggering, and I loved it so much. So did Casey, my girlfriend, and our friend Sheba, who watched it with us. Well, they've both seen it. Actually, I was the only new viewer.
Oh, so they knew what they were getting into.
And it was still transcendent for them. I mean, it's probably been a while since they've seen it, and certainly that neither of them had probably seen it in a theater. But I think the film is so powerful that, it can hit you hard multiple times.
Yes. Yeah. I'd never seen it in a theater. And this is, so A24 basically did this new 4K remaster, and Jerry Harrison, and I don't know who else. I don't know who he worked with, but I know they did a new sound mix for it and everything.
Yeah.
So it's very spruced up, and it looks and sounds spruced up. And that was the first time I'd seen it in theaters ever. And what a treat.
Yeah.
I recall the first time my wife and I had been dating for a couple years, and I finally got her to watch it. This is maybe about a decade ago. I finally got her to watch Stop Making Sense. And in the middle of it, she turned to me and she goes, "Oh, that's where you get your dance moves from." And I was like, yes. As
falling
you steal
over
from the best. Yes. Falling over, flailing around on the floor, doing laps around the venue. That's how I
do
roll.
that at every rock show.
Every rock show, every wedding,
My friend Sheba, who came to the screening with us, sent me a clip of David Byrne rehearsing those dance moves before we got to the theater. And I was actually really glad that I had seen that, because somehow knowing that the moves were choreographed and not spontaneous counterintuitively made them more exciting to me and cooler to me. I generally would go for spontaneous stuff, like something that was like a magical emergence from the show. But for some reason, seeing David, maybe because he was rehearsing those dance moves alone, there's something kind of poignant about that.
Yeah.
About imagining him alone in a room, figuring that out, and maybe with help, I don't know, and practicing them to try and get it right. It only added to it to me. And so then when I saw those moves show up in the film, I was like, oh, there it is.
Yes.
There's the stumbling.
David Byrne is a man who stumbles. He is a man who flails. He moves.
Yeah.
He moves like a mighty river, and he jerks around on the floor.
Yes.
And it's an incredible thing. And yes, many of my dance moves have come from him. Just the confidence in being unabashedly weird but rhythmic.
Yeah.
That's the important thing.
That's one of the most miraculous things about David Byrne to me, is that he, in many ways, he's like an emblem of nerddom. He's an emblem of, you know, like strange social interaction. And I know he's spoken recently about like his relationship with autism and stuff like that. But anyway, he's an emblem of like basically anti-cool, like uncoolness in many ways, and technological nerdery, and all of these things that you would that would lead you to expect stiffness from him. And in some ways, like, the music is a little bit stiff. There's always a little bit of an element of rigidity or something in it. I don't know. It feels blasphemous to even say that, because it doesn't take away from it whatsoever. But anyway, I think one of the most miraculous things about him is how unbelievably thoroughly liberated he is in that film, and always to this day, like including in American Utopia. And then I think it comes from what he believes in. I think he believes in dance. He believes in people moving their bodies. He says so at just about any opportunity. And so, as another like white person who is a bit of a nerd or whatever, and I don't have all the language fully at the tip of my tongue, but I think you kind of get what I'm talking about. I find it really inspiring that he feels so free, and that he felt so free, and that he employed that freeness with other people, like, and with audiences, and continues to employ that freeness with audiences. I think that's a deep social work.
Yes.
not to be like highfalutin about it. I think it's great. I think everyone gains from that. Everyone gains from watching him be that way, and I think everyone gains from, if there's someone who struggles to dance or struggles to move their body and get into music in public or whatever it is, or even in private, I don't know. Inching toward his example is good for you.
Yes.
Good for your soul.
Well, I think the movie, it's funny. There is kind of a narrative structure to the film,
Mm-hmm.
which was something else. And part of what makes it so effective is just a work of cinematic brilliance, is there is a story kind of being told here. And it is, they've commented on it, David Byrne and the rest of the band. It is in a way the story of the band, because when you start with Talking Heads in the mid 70s, they were kind of, it was new wave. It was, I guess it wouldn't be post-punk, because it was considered part of the punk movement, but it wasn't.
I know,
punk. It was
CBGBs and everything. But they're a funk band. Like, it's a soul funk band.
It is. What they did, what happened was, you start with the four of them. It's Jerry Harrison, Tina Weymouth, Chris Franz, and David Byrne, making this very rigid, like paranoid kind of herky-jerky music. That, and if you watch performances of the band from those days, it feels that way.
Totally.
And David Byrne is very clearly uncomfortable.
And it's collegial.
Yes.
They're collegiate.
They're wearing polo shirts. They're very clean cut. This is like,
it's Harvard Crimson.
Yeah. Even though they were pulled into the punk movement and they were kind of labeled as part of that, they were not remotely what you would associate it with punk. Comparing to the Ramones and the leather and the piercings and like just the anger and the hair. And there was more of an insular paranoia to the music. Like, it was less about the outward aggression and more about the inward kind of paranoia of a certain kind of aggression. And as the band went on with, Fear of Music and even more songs about buildings and food, where they covered Take Me to the River, you sense this movement into more rhythm, and they E Zimbra is the opening track on Fear of Music. You're kind of like, okay. And then you get to Remain in Light, which is very much like just full embracing the polyrhythmic attitude and African music in a way that is like, I didn't expect this to happen at all from these guys, but the film itself is almost tracking that narrative of the band becoming looser and funkier, and Byrne himself really opening up and kind of becoming less frightened and more comfortable, and the feeling of community around him empowers him to be his true self and to embrace himself through
Yeah,
these movements.
totally. Speaking of Take Me to the River, it's really funny that that song is part of their repertoire, part of their history, because it's funny that that was one of the most emotional moments in the film for me, because in the first place, I don't think of that song as a particularly poignant
No.
song in by any stretch, and especially not poignant because growing up, I was in one of the millions of households with a Billy Smallmouth bass
Yes.
fish toy, so that
Yeah.
song is
I think
permanently.
many people of our generations were introduced to Talking Heads through that
It's so
beautiful fish's mouth.
right. So it's like one of the weirdest novelty toys ever. And then I find myself in watching Stop Making Sense, like, oh my God, I'm like on the verge of tears listening to the Billy Smallmouth Bass song, the the plastic fish song. But it's true. I mean, part of it, that's like toward the end of the show, and that's when they finally open up and start showing audience shots.
Yes.
They're so restrained and deliberate about not showing hardly any audience at all until that point. And I get emotional watching audiences in any case, like with just about any band, especially Wilco, of course, but
Yeah.
whether it's in person or on film, something about witnessing other people's experience and devotion and unbridled happiness is really intense. And during that song, they finally open up and start showing people having just like the best time in their lives, and there you go. Then you're crying at the plastic fish.
Oh, that's beautiful. I mean, well, yeah, I cry at plastic fish on the regular. I think it's good. It's a good palate cleanser, but
Yeah.
I understand that completely. And I think part of, for me watching that, loving the song, but I think that's the moment where almost the facade drops in a way, because the big suit has come off. He pulls off the jacket, and he introduces the band like by name.
Yeah.
He's like, here they all are, and they all have their little moment. And Chris Frantz, who I can never tell if he misses his cue to come back after he waves. Is that something you noticed?
My impression was that it was on purpose, and my secondary impression was that the rest of the band was amazing for jumping back in right on it with him. Like they don't miss anything.
There we go. It's official. You heard it here first, folks. I've always wondered, but not being an amazing drummer, I never knew. Now we know. But I love the introduction of the band members, and the beauty of Steve Scales, who's the guy with the cowbell in that moment, like rallying up the audience and just going around and getting everybody. David Byrne, at that point, there's a red hat on stage that he puts on. So
he looks so funny in it.
Yes, the show is very, up to that point, very staged and rehearsed. And like you said, not in a way that takes away from it. It doesn't feel sterile or disconnected. It feels beautifully alive. But that to me is the moment where it's almost like it's the encore. Like the show has happened, and now we're connecting with the audience.
In one of those Q&As from the recent screenings that you sent me, they did say that they cut out the encore gap. So that might have been after a little encore.
Yeah, I imagine it was.
Be an encore.
And how did you feel about the lack of audience footage? You say you typically have such an emotion, and as somebody who has played on stage and like thrives in that live environment off audience interaction, did it work for you, or how did you feel about it?
I think it's one of the best aspects of the direction of the film, because I guess for a couple of reasons. One is, I think if they showed the audience right away, it could be alienating, because that is sort of by definition setting you apart from the people who are actually there, because you see them being there and you feel yourself not being there. Whereas with the only seeing the stage, only seeing the activity on the stage, you can sort of feel like we're part of it.
You're
like,
part of the show. Yeah,
you're part of the show, and then just by virtue of like, and then I think it's also a good choice just because they held on to something good, and then it has a big impact. Whereas if you're seeing that the whole time, seeing it right away, it would get diluted a little bit.
I agree. Someone brought it up. So I ended up seeing the film twice, actually. And I have a fun story about one of those screenings. But the second time I saw it on Sunday, one of my friends who hadn't seen it was kind of like, I wish they'd showed the audience more. And I said, well, it's funny. That was an incredibly innovative creative decision at the time.
Yeah, totally.
If you're looking at music videos and you're looking at concert films of this era, you kind of touched on it a little bit in the first part of the conversation. We talked about it, but in general, this was like the MTV, the peak of MTV. So you're looking at music as something that needs to be dressed up and eye-catching and energetic in the way it's cut and put together, as a means of kind of pulling in your audience and keeping their eyes glued to the screen. And, that included audience shots and things like that to kind of like, look, see how much fun. It's like a laugh track in a sitcom. It's like, they think it's funny. You should be thinking it's funny too. You should be applauding as well. And what was innovative about this film is, I think technically, Jonathan Demme realized pretty quickly that they didn't have enough light to get shots of the audience during the show. And if they tried,
you only turn the house lights up in the encore.
Exactly. So they couldn't do it because, and I think they tried it and they realized how off-putting it was for the audience and the band. Just that sudden, like we're being watched, and the spontaneity of it goes away. But it was something that I didn't really pick up, but psychologically you realize it. And then when you read about the film and listen to interviews later, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. And it's 100% what you said. The audience shots take you out of the experience. You no longer feel as immersed in it. And it really is kind of the cherry on top at the end when you're like, oh my God, like, look at these people. Look at why did this fashion go away? Why don't we have this in this day and age, really?
Yeah, and you've become curious about them because all the while they're there, and you've seen little glimpses in the corners of certain angles and like people in the front row. So then it's satisfying to finally have the mystery revealed. But also, you're talking about kind of the cheap ways that music video directors or concert film directors keep your eyes glued to the screen. And I think all throughout, Jonathan Demme and the band keep your interest the hard way with creativity on stage and in the music. Obviously the decision to come out one by one is just like you're waiting on the edge of your seat. The second any riser comes out, it's I'm sorry, even if you don't like the band, you don't like the music, whatever, you're interested, your curiosity is piqued. So obviously that decision, but also I think of when they did some sort of changeover with some instrument, I don't remember, and they start showing projections in the back with those triptychs with different words. I mean, come on, like, they created a show to try and make it interesting from beginning to end. and introduce new elements all the time, like not in an overwhelming onslaught, but like when it's aesthetically wanted. And that's the hard way. I respect it.
I 100%. And I think it really speaks to the power of the music in general. But you're right. You're sitting there, and I've seen this film so many times, but like any great film that I love that I can watch over and over again, I still get the same thrill when, they roll out the drum set, when Jerry Harrison pops up. But I think they say a lot of great storytelling is about setup and payoff. But setting all that up and just the slow build to the moment where Steve Scales comes out with the bongos and the backup singers and dancers come out and they break into Slippery People, and you're suddenly kind of like, if I played you Psycho Killer and then I played you Born Under Punches right after, you would be like, this is not the same band. How is this the same band?
Totally.
But it's that moment where you I feel myself surrendering to the film, and it's purposely, beautifully, and brilliantly edited and directed to get you to that point. And conceived by David Byrne, the show has that build as the music is changing and evolving in the same way their music did. They are changing and evolving, and they're pulling you in. And by the time you get to Burning Down the House, you're like, this is this is incredible. Like, I've never seen
Yeah,
anything like this in my life.
100%.
I love life during wartime. I think
Yeah.
a lot of my dance moves, particularly the falling on the floor and just jerking
Yes.
around on the floor, and the
Yes.
running. Not quite as good at the very fluid hand movements or
Oh,
arm
yeah,
movements that are on display there, but
It's so funny with the straight on shot at it.
yes,
It's so
absolutely brilliant.
Thank God they did all of those things with zero pretension. Like, that's one of the things that strikes me about any device that they employed, whether it's the risers rolling out on stage or the choreography and the lamp as a prop, whatever it is. It's not airbrushed and it's not sterile. Like, for example, when the drum riser comes out and then Chris France just kind of like bounds out on stage and leaps up on the
Yeah,
riser.
and he's just like, hey, he gives a little wave.
Yeah, and that's obviously his personality. I don't think he was ever going to do it any other way. But the fact that that sort of personality is allowed in, and also like the mundanity of their costumes,
Yes.
it's totally real. But most of all, the best example of all of the lack of pretension is the fact that they simply aren't pretentious. They're not scowling. They're not serious. They're not demanding everyone to take it seriously.
Yeah.
They've got these theatrical things, which could be shaky ground in other people's hands if they're taking themselves too seriously. But for them, it's just about making something interesting and having fun.
Yes.
And
it's all in service of the audience, and how can we
Yeah.
best engage our audience? And not just
Yeah.
that, but thinking about it in terms of, because the show, as I understand it, that basically was the show without the film, and maybe some things I know songs got cut out of the film, and different decisions were made, I'm sure, in terms
Yeah.
of bringing it to the big screen. But there is this feeling of like this was intended for audiences around the world to enjoy.
Yeah. And can you imagine getting to see that as just like a show you bought a ticket to?
Yeah.
On the rest of the tour, I mean, like when the cameras aren't there, it's unbelievable.
My friend said has anyone ever tried to go around and find the audience members they show at the end of the film, and like what are they doing now type thing? Like,
Yeah.
you were at that show, like you were a
Yeah.
little kid, you were the little kid with the unicorn. Like, what
Yeah.
happened? What was that like? What were you doing there?
I found myself feeling that way about some of the people I waited in line with to buy popcorn at the theater, like people who are David Byrne's age, the band's age, and who knows, maybe didn't see that tour, but may have seen them live. And I was like, oh, this probably feels differently for you than it does for me.
Yeah. But how beautiful that it was captured. So it's like
Yeah.
this legacy that will
Yeah.
outlive all of us. Like, it is
Yeah.
insane as
Yeah.
a statement of the band, of their creative intentions, and the beauty of their music at their peak.
100%.
I was on vacation last week. I went to Hilton Head Island in South Carolina, and my wife realized I'd already bought tickets for the show on Sunday, yesterday. But we were like, I was like, I know it's playing. Let's see if it's around, because my wife wasn't going to be able to come with me to the Sunday show, but I wanted to take her at some point. And we found out we were about an hour away from what is touted as the world's tallest IMAX screen.
Whoa.
Which happens to be in Pooler, Georgia.
Wow.
Pooler, Georgia. I guess it's it's close to Savannah, and I think that's all you can say to describe what Pooler, Georgia is. But I was like, oh, we're going to this. And we were talking a little bit about Destiny and how I kind of my presence sort of brought David Byrne
into my life.
Exactly. Yes. But in terms of just keeping that kind of spiritual, otherworldly essence, one of my close friends, Shannon, lives around Savannah, Georgia. And Shannon was one of the cool kids who I looked up to in high school, whose music tastes were way cooler than mine. And she was there on the night I saw Stop Making Sense for the very first time.
Whoa, no way.
And I asked her, I was like, Shannon, you have to come see on the tallest IMAX screen with me Stop Making Sense, because we have to bring this full circle. And she did. And I asked her, I was like, do you remember? I was like, you were there, right? Do you remember? And she says, I remember Andrew, our mutual friend, who was the guy who was like, David Byrne, but you don't know Talking Heads. She
Yeah.
said you guys were in the basement and he ran upstairs and ran past me. And he's like, Shawn hasn't seen Stop Making Sense. I'm getting my DVD, and ran
Oh my
past her.
God.
I imagine he said it with the same energy as in The Matrix when Mouse runs into the room and says, Morpheus is fighting Neo, and everybody runs out. That's what I imagine happened. But I got to see it with my friend who was there the very first time
That's beautiful.
I ever saw it. So
that's beautiful.
That was really, really wonderful. I loved seeing it with my wife again. She'd seen it before, but it's not the same as when you see it in a movie theater and you have your phone and you can get distracted and you can leave the room and come back. And she kept like turning to me and like nudging me during. She's like, "This is really good," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, I know this is this is wonderful. I knew this. Yeah, you should know this too." And there are a couple things I love. I wrote these things down because I thought they were amazing. At the end of the movie, she was like, "That was incredible," and then she kind of like, she's like, David Byrne was like really sexy. And I was like, how long have we been together? I've been telling you this for years. About my David Byrne man crush. He's a rival for my affections. You're like,
David Byrne is my hall pass.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, how long? I felt like I didn't know her at all anymore, but it was very, very beautiful. And another thing I thought she said that was really poignant, talking about getting emotional during certain songs. She told me later, she was like, I was getting really emotional during Once in a Lifetime. And she's like, I never realized how sad that song is. Like it's a song. And this is something that Talking Heads does really well. And I think your dad's band, Wilco, does really well. But the contrast of the sound with the lyrical content.
Yeah.
And just talking with her about Once in a Lifetime and having this very like poignant conversation about like, it's about a guy who's like having a midlife crisis, essentially, like what's happened, where am I, what has my life become, and the water holding me down and all this stuff where you start to realize. And she's like, I was getting kind of choked up actually watching and listening to that song. Really, it felt like for the first time.
Totally. The old switcheroo.
Yeah, exactly. It's a beautiful thing, but it's also like speaking to the technical brilliance of the film. I think we're trained to expect, like, again, rapid fire cutting to hold the audience attention. The performance is basically a single shot of David Byrne that never cuts until we get to kind of the outro of the song, where we cut to that shot of the singers kind of lit and that beautiful, it's Jerry and the two of them and David Byrne. But the whole thing just hinges on his performance and his ability to hold your attention in a single shot. And it's absolutely stunning and amazing. I love that moment. And I think David Byrne gets a lot of attention for this film, and rightfully so, because he is unequivocally the star of the film. But I don't think this film is as strong as it is, even with him, without this incredible ensemble.
Absolutely,
I think it's a film where you can literally walk out of the theater and say, "Oh, my favorite character was Bernie Worrell, the guy who kept making eyes at the camera, and giving us looks." But was there an individual who you found yourself admiring, David Byrne or otherwise?
I'm glad you asked, because as truly, I'll just use the word miraculous again, as truly miraculous as David Byrne's own performances and what he brings to music and life in general, as we were discussing, I think the performer on stage who moves me the most is Tina Weymouth.
Yes.
And I really don't know what it is. I think it's just her sheer, pure owning it that is, seeing anybody fully owning it is intense and beautiful. And she owns it like just about nobody else. I think that her stage presence is completely magnetic, and there's never been anyone like her before or since. And obviously she sounds incredible. Her playing is so great. I think the most shining moment of her playing in the film is when she accompanies David in that duo, like when she's the first other musician out on stage. I can't remember the name of that song.
Heaven.
Yeah, Heaven. Oh my God. I mean, that's incredible. It's not easy to be nakedly out there with that instrument, and it's perfect. But It might also, the way I feel about when she's on screen might also have to do with, I remembered, since we talked last time, that one of my first experiences watching Talking Heads play was the footage from, I'm pretty sure it's from Old Grey Whistle Test. I gotta look it up again. But my dad showed me their performance on what's most likely Old Grey Whistle Test from like 77 or something, specifically to show me Tina Weymouth's playing and her stage presence. I think in that they're playing Psycho Killer, and in that episode she's completely like menacing, looking menacingly at the camera, and it's not the same approach or attitude that you see in Stop Making Sense, but still special.
Yeah.
And I think she's kind of like the hero of the ensemble, and
She's
I
the
think,
backbone.
yeah, she, in that Q&A with Spike Lee that you sent, she has one of the most amazing quotes ever when she says, Spike basically doesn't ask her a question. He just says, like, "You're the bass player. Wow. Like, you're great. No question." And what she says was, "My great contribution to the band was never turning my amp up above 3 because that allowed everyone else to shine." Which, I don't know, me reciting the quote sounds like just like a bit of run-of-the-mill humbleness, but I don't know. It's badass coming from her.
Yeah, and especially after you watch this movie. Well, I think you and Tina have something in common, which is this kind of discomfort or feeling of inferiority based on everything else around you. And I have to say, Spencer, you are the Tina Weymouth, I think, of
Oh my
of
God.
Tweedy for sure. But I think you perform the same function where allow me to be the person pouring out the accolades for you in this moment. But I think a lot of the strengths that she demonstrates are strengths that I have seen you demonstrate as well in your musical ability.
That's like the highest compliment ever. Thank you.
To be compared,
Truly.
you know what? If my wife can compare my dancing to David Byrne, I think you've earned a comparison to Tina Weymouth for sure. But I think as far as like favorite characters go, I mean, David Byrne, it goes without saying. It's a beautiful thing. But I love Jerry Harrison's dancing with Edna and Lynn. Just the way it's, some of this feels choreographed, but some of it feels spontaneous. And I think a lot of the choreographed nature came from maybe the spontaneity of finding these moments in prior shows. But I love that. And I love Steve Scales so much. I love the moment where he, after Slippery People, before burning down the house, when Alex Weir, the other guitarist, comes out on stage, and they've wheeled out the percussion section of the stage, and they kind of like Alex Weir comes out on stage, and Steve Scales kind of like, it's like they tag each other out. Like Steve Scales is like, all right, I'm going to get back here. You go up there. I love that little moment. And there are a lot of little moments like that in the movie. There's another one where
David grabs his guitar neck, like at the peak of Alex's guitar solo.
Yes.
That was awesome.
I love that. I love during This Must Be the Place, which I'm starting to feel This Must Be the Place might be my favorite, not only favorite Talking Heads song, but maybe my favorite song. It's a toss up between that and can you guess what the other song is?
Hate It Here?
Hate It Here is great. It's a toss up. Your dad might not forgive me for this, but it's a toss up between that and Jesus, etc. So go back and forth between the two. This Must Be the Place was the runner up for mine and Sarah's wedding dance song, but we did in fact end up going with You and I by Wilco. So.
Oh, well, that's fitting.
At least it was a worthy. It certainly is a worthy selection. But there's a moment where Alex Weir, during the song, looks back at Bernie Worrell on the synthesizer, and it's a moment that I haven't heard other people talk about, but it's a moment I love so much. He kind of looks back at him, and Bernie Worrell is out of focus, but he notices Alex is looking at him, and he kind of does this little like wiggle dance move to make him laugh. And Alex is laughing and turns back to the camera before it pans back over to David Byrne. And I have to shout out Lisa Day, the editor, because I'm sure she was in, obviously as the editor, she's in that booth with Jonathan and
Yeah.
making those decisions and saying,
Yeah.
let's linger on this a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Because at this point, Steven Scales is going to turn around and stick his tongue out at the camera, and it's going to be very funny.
Yes.
And I love that those little, again, humanizing moments in this very produced show are left in the film, and little things happening like that all the time.
Absolutely. There's even plenty of continuity errors too, which obviously don't take one iota away from the greatness of the film. It's just simply not what matters, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Not at all.
Not one bit. Are there, if we're talking about great performance, what are some lessons you think that Wilco should maybe take from Talking Heads and the speaking in tongues era of their career? Do you want to see your dad running around the stage? I know now he's having hip issues, so maybe not now.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah, I mean, I would love to see, more movement, but that is impossible with the current state of my dad's hip. I think it's fun when I think as a kid it might have been embarrassing to see him run in place during Hummingbird, but I think it's cool today.
I saw him 2000, the first Wilco show I ever went to. He brought a little girl on stage and danced with her.
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
It was a very sweet moment. He sang to her during Hummingbird, and at the end he said, "Consider that your song, but we get to keep the royalties."
That's hilarious. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, Wilco they all are who they are, and I consider myself and all of ourselves who are fans and listeners lucky that they have as much fun and rapport as they do on stage. Would anyone, if you asked any one of them if they aspire to stop making sense levels of like energy and magic, I think each one of them would say yes, but ultimately they know that those people are those people, and they are who they are.
But it's okay. And I think I kind of touched on this a little bit in part one, but it's something I actually started to think about, funnily enough, after the first part of our conversation, because I said, and it's true, my favorite bands, I tell people, the Beatles, Wilco, and Talking Heads. And Wilco and Talking Heads, we're comparing them, and obviously it's a strange thing these are two bands that are kind of like, on the surface, you're like, I don't really see the connection. Again, why it was so miraculous that I brought David Byrne to the forefront at Solid Sound. I think because of that kind of like, you wouldn't expect that. Paul McCartney, I would expect to come out on stage. Bob Dylan, even, I would expect.
Wow, that'd be cool. Can you start wishing for both of those?
I've been working on it since Solid Sound. I'm really channeling all my energies into this.
Please do.
But David Byrne was one that it was just kind of like, what a strange occurrence that I happened to be there, and these two worlds that I love so much have collided. But then I started thinking about it, and I was like, when you start to dig beneath the surface, I think what Wilco and Talking Heads have in common, and what David Byrne's music continues to have in common with your dad's music, is a fearlessness of innovation and a real intention and passion for not getting stuck inside a box. Not saying like, well, that was fun to do last time, so maybe we'll do it again. It's saying, like, we're going to try something new. And similarly, their fourth albums, if we're counting Yankee Hotel Foxtrot as the fourth album and not Mermaid Avenue, Remain in Light was Talking Heads' fourth album, and that was a major shift in soundscape for them as well. And I think you see that innovation, that adventurous spirit, but love and passion for what's being done as well. There have been change ups in Wilco, and the current lineup is, it's been 20 years now, almost.
More than,
really. Yeah. So, we're talking about the longest stretch of Wilco's lifespan has been this current lineup. And Talking Heads, sadly, this was really the final document for them. Like, this was their final tour. And it was definitely the splintering of the band's relationships. And honestly, I love Little Creatures, I love True Stories, and I love Naked, their last album. But there is you feel it in the music that the synergy just isn't there as much anymore.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think I don't think Wilco get enough credit for it. And I don't think your dad and the rest of the band get enough credit for just their ability to like really inspire and be there for each other in a way that keeps that band going.
Mm-hmm.
But it's sad. It makes me sad that this was kind of like, it was the peak and then it was kind of after that it's done.
Yeah.
And I kind of understand it. I wanted to pick your brain about it a little bit, but I can kind of see maybe this is all assumption on my part and comes from a place of pure love for this band and for these people. But I can see how maybe David Byrne was starting to feel like these are the avenues I want to explore, and I want the means to explore them. And the rest of the band was like, we're not your backup band. And I can see Stop Making Sense as maybe the breaking point where David Byrne is being rightfully heralded as a star of the film, because he is, and he 100%, he's a rock star and he is an incredible presence on stage. But you can watch the film and maybe sense that the reaction to it and the reaction to him certainly pushed him to kind of like, well, I don't want to necessarily be held back by what this band is and what we've done. I really want to try new things, and maybe at the detriment of the relationships. I've appreciated a lot of because they there's a pretty notorious beef between Tina Weymouth and Chris Franz and David Byrne.
Right.
They've taken pot shots at each other. And there's a really great interview they did on CBS Sunday Morning recently where you can sense the news anchor kind of prying a little bit, and not in a mean exploitative way, but he's a news anchor and he needs a soundbite, but trying to kind of prod a little bit, like, what happened? Do you guys regret anything you did? Maybe David Byrne, is there anything you want to apologize? But like, Tina Weymouth, again, the champion of Stop Making Sense, the champion of this episode, she said something really beautiful. Right? She said, I think, these things happen and maybe you don't forget, but we're family and we do forgive. And I really love that as a note to leave the band on as they're celebrating the 40th anniversary, and that they get that. But
I agree.
It's a long-winded way of saying it's a shame that Talking Heads couldn't have gone longer, but also I think the collective we, as in everybody out there, everyone in the world, needs to appreciate and recognize the beauty of when a band like Wilco can keep going for as long as they're going and still love it and enjoy it the way that they do.
Thank you. Once again, feels good to be seen, for that to be seen. Tina's quote reminds me of Paul McCartney's famous quote about John, which is, or maybe it was the other way around, John talking about Paul, but anyway, he said, some prying journalist was like, what about your new song? How Can You Sleep? And that's the song called How Can You Sleep, which is widely believed to be about Paul, and it's scathing. And John's response was, I'm allowed to be mad at my best friend. I'm allowed to quarrel with my best friend. Something like that.
Yes. And
that's just the truth. It's freaking both. Anyone who has a family knows that it's not all perfect. Those relationships aren't perfect. And why would we expect our favorite musicians' relationships to be any different?
Agreed. Are there any songs that, well, let's say favorite song? You can have a couple. I'm going to make you go first because I am now realizing I don't know if I've picked mine.
I'm going to go with some that I've already mentioned in the episode. Heaven being one, because it's so brave and gorgeous to have that. That's like a arena sing-along. In many respects, I feel like the film is backwards in that they chose to start with the backdrop up. You see the naked wall of the theater. It makes the space feel small and knowable. Whereas a lot of people would like try to shock and awe you, like open on the like a stadium. Obviously it was shot in a theater, not a stadium. But they start and try and make it as big as possible, but they start small, they go big as it goes on. Maybe that is intuitive after all. But anyway, the song Heaven, in keeping with that pattern, or rather in keeping with the intuitive.
There you go.
And counterintuitive.
It's late. It's getting late. It's
quality.
Getting late.
Yeah. In keeping with that quality of the film, that's like a song that you would maybe traditionally see a performer come out and do as an encore piece, duo style, and it would be like a big sing along. But they put you in that space, in that contemplative and relatively sad space right off the bat. So I think that's special. And then I think my other pick, like I was saying, would be Take Me to the River, because it's pure joy. And I don't even particularly like that song. I have never once put that song on in my life other than hearing it involuntarily from the mouth of a plastic toy. But it's so special, and any chance we get to witness joy on that level is worth hanging on to.
Definitely. I mean, this must be the place. I love the vulnerability of it, the beautiful vulnerability of it, the fact that the song ends with him dancing with a lamp, and it's beautiful, and it's hilarious, but it's also very, very sweet. That was the only night where the lamp didn't break or the bulbs shatter or something happened with the lamp that caused that dance to fall apart. Yeah, they only had one night and they managed to get it. So it's a very, very beautiful moment. But I want to also give a special shout out to Slippery People, which is the song where they bring on Steve Scales and Enna Holt and Lynn Mabry. And that's the first time where you get the funkiness, really. Like Found a Job with Jerry has a little bit of it. Like you're starting to feel like, okay.
Yeah.
But that's the moment where I feel like, oh damn, this is, you're gonna have to dance to this. Like this is good stuff. And it's like really, it's that moment again of payoff where they've been building. And it's not even the peak. Burning down the house and Life During Wartime are kind of the peak of that moment, that build up. But Slippery People is like the moment where it's almost like you've reached the top of the roller coaster and you know it's going to go down, but it's that moment of exhilaration where you're like, oh my God, this is happening. So
100%.
That's always been one of my favorites, and I adore that song. Is there a Talking Heads song you wanted to hear that wasn't in the movie?
No, I think they played everything I wanted. This Must Be the Place, Slippery People.
Once in a Lifetime was the one you were hoping for.
Once in a Lifetime. I couldn't say it's all there because they made more and they made more great stuff, but it's a generous serving. It's a generous heap.
And you do get, I mean, American Utopia is kind of a spiritual sequel to this.
It's so great. It's really
amazing.
So great.
It really is. Like it was the Stop Making Sense sequel I always wanted.
Similarly to Stop Making Sense, you watch that film American Utopia feeling like a bewilderment. How did they do this? How did David Byrne do this? Even just like technologically, I guess Stop Making Sense is sort of straightforward, but even so, there's some like stage magic and theater magic to it. And likewise with American Utopia, it's such a simple thing. I know the episode's not about that film, but it's such a simple thing to think of decoupling the instruments, decoupling the drum set from its traditional form and letting everyone become mobile and all of that. And anyone could have done it. And of course others have in different ways or smaller ways, but he does it in such a special way. And it is on a level, I think, with Stop Making Sense. Obviously none of like the historical context and the excitement of the time isn't there. So he doesn't have the benefit of that, but artistically and musically, it's, I think, just as ambitious and just as cool.
And I think it is like a worthy, like you can put it on the pedestal and be like, this deserves to be up here. I really also love, and I mean, Spike Lee's great in general, but I loved in the thanks, the special thanks at the end of the film, thanks Jonathan Demme, which I thought was really sweet. I love the one song and it perfectly transitions into the talk of American Utopia. The one song I miss that I desperately want to hear is Born Under Punches. That's one of my favorites. And I love in American Utopia the way they play it, which is the building of the rhythm to prove that the music is live and happening. I saw I didn't see the Broadway show, but I did see the show when David Byrne was touring it, And
Yeah.
that moment happened live, and I was very, very happy it appeared again in
Nice.
the film. It's almost a nice little nod to Stop Making Sense, the slow
Yeah.
build of how it becomes just this beautiful ensemble.
Totally. That drummer, I think his name is Steven, can't remember his full name right now, but one of the percussionists in American Utopia has been at Solid Sound. He's performed at Solid Sound.
Was he there last year?
No, it was more years ago, and I think he was performing on Fillmore with Glenn and Darren Gray.
Oh my God. Why wasn't I there? I was storing my energy for the David Byrne.
Yes.
video.
And storing your energy for transmitting your energy.
It takes a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, you really have to, your mind, soul, and body must be aligned.
Yes.
Well, is there anything else we haven't said about Stop Making Sense that you feel merits saying?
I don't think so. There's more perspective to be had on the film. Obviously, I haven't turned over every rock, but the most I can say is I'm just dumbfounded. It's great. Great. It's so great.
That's all there is to it.
That's all there is to it. There's truly no other concert film like it. And it's exciting and unconventional. And I'm really glad that you spurred me to watch it.
I'm glad you finally got to see it. And I'll conclude with two stories. One is, I'm going to try to read this without laughing. I have yet to do this. David Byrne, this is a Brian Eno story about David Byrne. He said he's always been genuinely eccentric, and I've seen him remain like that in quite extreme situations. For instance, we were mugged together once in New York.
Oh,
it was
yes.
quite frightening. My enduring memory is of David being dragged off into the bushes saying, "Uh-oh."
I love that story.
One of my absolute favorite stories. And then the second one is Jonathan Demme passed away in 2017, April 2017. My good friend Andrew Schaefer passed away, I think, a week later.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. These are the two people who basically opened the door for the love of Talking Heads to me. And I think that love kind of opened the door for me to get into bands like Wilco, and wanted to send a lot of love and energy to Andrew and Jonathan and remembering them, but really, really love that we were able to share this. And final ratings, how many big suits do you give? 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest?
Absolutely 5. 5 big suits with multiples of me or some small children stacked up inside them.
Perfect. Spencer, this has been an absolute delight and a pleasure. I'm so glad we got to talk about this movie together. It's been a joy.
You too, Shawn. Seriously, it's really nice to talk to somebody who's so sincerely invested in film and music like you are. And it also doesn't hurt that you have such kind things to say about my family and me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And if the good people at home want to find you anywhere out there on the internet, you're making music and you're doing stuff.
Yeah, just on my website, spencertweedy.com is generally where I put everything there. I like to hashtag personal websites, or I shouldn't say hashtag because that's of a different paradigm. Personal websites are fun to make and a good way to find music and visual art from people and stuff. So that's where I put stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm at Shawn Dorman on Twitter. It's not Twitter anymore, and I don't know what it is now. So you really don't find me there, but you can find me on Letterboxd, the wonderful world of Letterboxd, Shawn Dorman 05. Yes, Spencer, if you don't have Letterboxd, you need to, and they need to pay me for all the endorsing I've done of their service.
Yes,
so
backdated.
Yes. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will see you at the movies.